What did Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. dream? You know, over my many years, not only as a minister, but as a Unitarian Universalist, I've read and listened to his speeches and even read a couple of biographies about him. His sermons and speeches were always passionate and inspiring to me. And it was clear to me as I listened and read about him that he was a person who lived his beliefs in all that he did. His beliefs grounded him in his works in the world, and not just for civil rights. I think we think of him as a civil rights leader, but he was more than that. Professor of Ethics and Theology at Union Theological Seminary, Gary Dorian, wrote, "Dr. King was more radical than anyone around him. He dragged the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC, to campaign in Chicago where his lieutenants did not want to go. He got pelted with rocks in Chicago and admonished by his staff that white Americans had never intended to integrate their schools and neighborhood. He also said that white Americans literally sought to annihilate the American Indian. He defied the civil rights establishment, the Johnson administration, and his closest advisors by opposing the Vietnam War. He campaigned for a minimum guaranteed income, something we're hearing about today again, and bitterly regretted he did not speak in public about democratic socialism. At the end, near the end of his life, he dragged the SCLC into the Poor People's Campaign, which is still going on today. In addition to all this, Dr. King built interfaith connections around the country, advocated for a balance between reason and faith in religion, and preached his vision of what churches should be. He preached the church is not a social club, although some of you might think it is. They get caught up in their exclusivism, and they feel that it's a kind of social club within a veneer of religiosity. But the church is not a social club. The church is also not an entertainment center, although some people would think it is. You can tell in many churches how they act in church, which demonstrates that they think that church is an entertainment center. The church is not an entertainment center. In the final analysis, the church has a purpose. The purpose is dealing with man's ultimate concern. Much of my life as a Unitarian Universalist, I have affirmed this vision of what church should be. It calls us as a faith tradition to help people deal with their ultimate concerns: life, death, purpose, meaning, truth. And since I've been a minister, I have preached that message as well, from my heart. I see too many churches that lean in those two directions, a social club or an entertainment center. Here at this church, together, we are called to explore truth, meaning, purpose, and reflect on how to live those out, live that truth, meaning, and purpose in our lives, in our relationships, and how we treat our planet. Although much of the language that King used was very Christological in nature, it does not take much for me, anyway, to listen to his sermons and to translate them through my own personal faith and outlook on life. His sermons provided a grounding and a reminder of the importance of thinking deeply about one's faith. You could hear in them his own personal search for truth and meaning, as well as his work to diligently, consistently work for justice, equity, and peace in our world. He preached, and I say to you, I have also decided to stick with love. For I know that love is ultimately the answer to all of mankind's problems. And I'm going to talk about it everywhere I go. I know it isn't popular to talk about it in some circles today. And I'm not talking about emotional bosh when I talk about love. I'm talking about a strong, demanding love. For I have seen too much hate. I've seen too much hate in the faces of sheriffs in the South. I've seen too much hate in the faces of too many Klansmen, too many white citizen counselors in the South to want to hate myself. Because every time I see it, I know it does something to their faces and their personalities. And I say to myself that hate is too great a burden to bear. I have decided instead to love. I've read these words before and heard them, recordings, and I thought about them this week as we experienced the insurrection in the Capitol. I saw the expressions on the faces of those rioting and hurting others. I wondered too about hate. And I affirmed to myself, even as I saw them, that I could not hate. It was too great a burden, too strong a possibility that would infect and poison my soul. So I affirmed again, just as King did again and again, to love. To love. Dr. King's life and his work serve as an example or a model of putting the needs of other people before one's own needs in order for change to happen. His life was often at risk because of this, and was ultimately lost because he chose to speak truth to power and to keep speaking truth to power again and again and again. My friends, we know. We know there are risks when working for justice, equity, peace. UU Miami put a Black Lives Matter banner in front of the building here on our property and here within our sanctuary. That's a risk. And in case you didn't know, the banner outside was stolen on Election Day. We quietly replaced it. We knew there would be, not might be, risks from putting the banner outside, and for that matter, inside our building. And there are risks with putting this flag here inside our building. This flag supporting lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, transsexual, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual, ally, and pansexual communities. It speaks loud and proud, as does our LGBTQ flag outside our building. There are risks to do that. There are always risks. When we speak for equity and justice, when we speak truth to power, when we act from our deeply held beliefs, and here at UU Miami, we're willing to take those risks. UU Miami's work in the world is part of our living tradition as Unitarian Universalists. It's built into our principles with words like justice, equity, democracy, dignity, and peace. Words that we choose to say when we describe who we are to the world. And working for justice, equity, and peace is always a choice we make individually and together. We, each of us, and as a community, make choices to what risks we're willing to take, what issues we are willing to address to make this world a better place. Whether we share our truths about justice and equity with our family, our friends, our co-workers, or strangers we've never met. Whether we show up at a rally or protest. Whether we speak truth to power in the local government, state government, national government. Whether we side with love, and side with those who are marginalized or oppressed. We make choices. We make choices about what issues we'll stand up for, support. And we need to, and we do, nurture one another in this work. Not pigeonhole what we are supposed to do or how we are supposed to work because we are Unitarian Universalists. We make our own choices. Dr. King wouldn't be pigeonholed either in what he chose to work for. And he preached for those who asked the question, aren't you a civil rights leader? And thereby mean to exclude me from the movement for peace. I have this further answer. In 1957, when a group of us formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, we chose our motto to be to save the soul of America. We were convinced we could not limit our vision to certain rights for black people, but instead affirm the conviction that America would never be free or saved from itself until the descendants of its slaves were loosed completely from the shackles they wear. Now it should be incandescently clear that no one who has a concern for the integrity and life of America today can ignore the present war. If America's soul becomes totally poisoned, part of the autopsy must be Vietnam. It can never be said so long as it destroys the deepest hopes of men the world over. So it is that those of us who are yet determined that America will be are led down the path of protest and dissent, working for the health of our land. He would not be pigeonholed. He would not just work for what was expected of him, and nor should we. We look within our minds and our hearts to decide what we will work on, what causes we will take up individually and together. I have read and listened to Dr. King's words from time to time for inspiration, for motivation, even for direction. And I let his dreams call to my dreams. When I listen to his "I have a dream" speech, I wonder within myself, what are my dreams? And I ask you, what are your dreams for a better world? What are you willing to do to achieve those dreams in your heart and mind? I have always affirmed what King preached when he said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And when I listen, I realize I have only enough time, treasure, talent to do a certain amount. And so I watch for where my time and talent and treasure will make a difference. Sometimes I can have a pretty big impact and make a difference in what's going on in our world at the moment. Sometimes I'm just talking to a marginalized or oppressed person or persons and realize how I can support them in their work. Sometimes the project I take on requires a focus and intention for a long period of time in order to make a difference. And perhaps if I take this on, if I'm part of this, that this project may not get done in my lifetime. I bring all this up Because right now, this congregation is working on decentering whiteness, acknowledging white supremacy and white privilege, reading about anti-racism and white fragility. And we are just starting to study indigenous peoples' history in the United States and the issues indigenous people are facing. As we study these things, as we read about them, as we hear about them, I wonder what new thing, what righteous action, what new way of doing social justice might result from these intensive study groups. What will birth into the world because of them? At our last social justice meeting, we decided on a couple of things. One is that this congregation is too small to do big things. Maybe. I'm not so sure. But we decided that our size also makes us nimble. Nimble enough to be there when social justice work is needed. To be open and ready for when an injustice arises and brings ourselves to that work. As we did in helping to close down the Homestead Detention Center for immigrant youth. And so we decided to work for and financially support 4 local nonprofits. People Acting for Community Together, or PACT, a local interfaith grassroots organizing group working on issues such as policing, gun violence, and housing. And the Florida Immigration Coalition, or FLIC, working for immigrants, those new to our country, or for their rights, so that they will be treated fairly. And Planned Parenthood, working for reproductive rights, health, and choice. And Florida Rising, defending voters' rights and building political power to combat systemic racism that attempts to leave black and brown communities overlooked and underserved. Do you have a role in all of this? What might that role be? That is for you to decide. Maybe you could join us in the Decentering Whiteness book study. Anybody can. Or the Indigenous Peoples History classes. Maybe you could learn more about the nonprofits that we're supporting. Or even choose to get involved with some of these nonprofits that we're supporting. You can do that individually. We'll figure out how to do that as a community, a group together. And you'll have that opportunity to join us in any work that we do. How you make that choice. Well, Dr. King said this: let us not be dissatisfied until slums are cast into the junk heaps of history and every family will live in a decent, sanitary home. Let us be dissatisfied until the dark yesterdays of segregated schools will be transformed into bright tomorrows of quality integrated education. Let us be dissatisfied until integration is not only seen as a problem, but as an opportunity to participate in the beauty of diversity. Let us be dissatisfied until men and women, however black they may be, will be judged on the basis of the content of their character not on the color of their skin. Let us be dissatisfied. What are you dissatisfied with? You can't choose everything. But perhaps on this holiday weekend, on this Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend, you might read or listen to a speech by King. Consider what injustice you feel dissatisfied with. And let King's passion and vision, his dreams for a better world, a more peaceful world, inspire you. And then decide on your next steps. To learn more about the issues that are important to you. To reflect more within yourself in order to deepen your understanding of why certain issues are important to you. Whether stories or history, something that triggers those issues for you so you have a better understanding of where that passion is coming from. And then act more, allowing what calls you, what's in your heart to work for, to be manifested in how you live your life. In this complicated and challenging world, we need to remember that though I am only one, still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will refuse to do the something that I can do. Amen.